They thought it was going to be an easy win, a corporate giant with a legal team so polished they didn't walk. They glided. Suits pressed, resumes long enough to need index tabs. Their briefcases didn't just carry documents, they carried certainty. And, across the aisle, a teenager. No legal team, no nameplate on the table, no law degree, just Barron Trump, and that was enough for every camera in the building to show up. The courtroom that morning felt more like a press event than a hearing. Downtown Manhattan, 9:01 a.m. The media had lined up before sunrise. Half came for the scandal, the other half for the fall. People thought they were about to watch a Trump kid implode. Live, in front of a judge. The chatter was predictable. He's just here to protect the family's name. What? He'll fold before opening arguments. This isn't law. It's a PR stunt. And yet, there he was, standing at the defense table, alone, calm, like someone who had walked into the fire because he knew exactly how it burned. If you're into stories that twist expectations, hit that like button, drop a comment, and don't forget to subscribe, because this story, it only gets deeper. Judge Eleanor Quinn presided over the courtroom like a hawk in heels. She didn't care about last names, didn't care if your dad ran empires or reality shows. To her, justice was blind. But she had a reputation for sniffing out bull before it made it to the witness stand. And today her eyes narrowed the second she saw him. "Mr. Trump," she said, voice flat, tone razor sharp. "What exactly is your role here today?" The court fell silent. A pause, no lawyer to lean on, no microphone check, just that cold space between assumption and reality. Then came the reply. "I'm here to speak on behalf of the defense," Barron said, voice steady. "Permission to present argument, Your Honor." Whispers rippled across the gallery. The opposing attorney, a man who'd argued before the Supreme Court twice, smirked without even looking up from his notes. "This should be fun," he muttered. Judge Quinn raised an eyebrow. "You're not licensed to practice law." "I understand that," Barron replied. "But as the court is aware, pro se representation is permissible." "Not when it turns into theatrics," she cut in. "If I smell even 1 ounce of performance—" "You won't," he said before she could finish. "I didn't come here to perform. I came here to prevent a mistake." That shifted something. Not much, but enough for the judge to sit back, fold her arms, study him like a puzzle that didn't quite fit the box it came in. The corporate lawyers didn't even look concerned. Why would they? They weren't up against a lawyer. They were up against a kid. And not just any kid. The quiet one. The one they thought would flinch at pressure. The one they expected to melt under scrutiny. But what they didn't know was this. This wasn't about politics. It wasn't about headlines. It was personal. Because the land they were fighting for wasn't just property. It was home to people who didn't have teams of lawyers. People who had no voice. So Barron stood in the silence, not just as a Trump, but as the only person in that room who still believed the law was supposed to protect the weak. And in 5 minutes he would flip this entire courtroom upside down? What happens next? You're not going to want to miss it. Tap that subscribe button and stay with me, because this trial's about to take a turn no one saw coming. It should have ended right there. A kid standing alone at the defense table, no counsel, no firm behind him, no bar license. Just one name and a mountain of public skepticism pressing down like gravity. Judge Eleanor Quinn tapped her pen once. Sharp. Measured. "Fine," she said. "You want to speak? Speak. But be advised you have 5 minutes to convince this court that you're not wasting its time." The timer started. Literally. A digital clock blinked to life above the clerk's station. 0.459. No one expected him to last past 4:30. Barron stepped forward. Calm. Hands resting lightly on a slim black binder. No briefcase, no entourage. He cleared his throat, not to stall but to center. Then he began. "Your Honor, opposing counsel has referenced Newberry v. Locke 5 times across their opening statement. Yet they've failed to mention one key distinction: that case involved eminent domain under federal jurisdiction. This case is rooted in municipal overreach, which renders their citation not just weak." He paused, glanced at the clock. 427? But irrelevant. The room blinked. Not literally, but you could feel it, like the air just shifted from bored to alert. Across the aisle, lead attorney Thomas Greer, a man known for dismantling legal arguments like demolition crews take down buildings, finally looked up. Just a flicker. Then he leaned back in his chair, pen still in hand but not writing anymore. Barron flipped a page in his binder. Furthermore, he continued, they've conveniently excluded Wilkinson v. Carr, which established that community residence, regardless of title, grants legal standing in public use litigation. My client, he gestured toward the single mother seated quietly behind him, barely visible behind rows of corporate suits, has lived on that property for 18 years, and she wasn't given notice, which violates State Code 106-333. Judge Quinn's head tilted. She didn't speak, but for the first time she was listening. The courtroom was quiet now. Not silent from boredom, but from tension. The kind of quiet you hear before a storm doesn't hit, but changes direction. Barron didn't speak quickly. He didn't rant. He didn't even raise his voice. He just cut, every word a scalpel. At 3:51, Attorney Greer stood up, interrupting without permission. Your Honor, I think we've indulged this long enough. This is a mock trial presentation at best. The boy is reciting Google results. Would you like to refute the citations? Judge Quinn asked, still not looking at him. I don't have to. The burden of proof is shifting, Barron said. Not loud, just clear, and if your argument can't stand against facts, maybe it's not the argument you think it is. Boom! Just like that. Not a punch, a pressure drop. The temperature in the room sank 10 degrees. Judge Quinn looked at Greer now. Not impressed, not angry, just tired. The way a professor gets when a student with all the answers finally runs out of excuses. Back at the defense table, Barron turned another page. I'd also like to enter this into the record. He held up a document, a scanned letter with a signature at the bottom. This is a signed statement from the building's former zoning inspector confirming that the corporate purchase order was submitted after the official renewal deadline. That makes the acquisition null under Article 42. Greer froze. That wasn't public. That document had never made it to discovery. Where did you get that? Greer asked, lips thinning. I asked, Barron replied. Unlike your client, she responded. He placed the document down. Calm, flat, unshaken. 217, still under time, still no stumbles. You could hear someone in the press section let out an accidental, damn. Judge Quinn looked down at the letter, then back up. Is this legitimate? It's been notarized, time-stamped, and submitted to the court with proper chain of custody. Greer was pale now. Like someone watching a chess match, they didn't realize they were losing until 3 moves too late, 146. In closing, Your Honor, Barron said, closing his binder, if this court allows the forced acquisition to proceed based on a knowingly incomplete record, then we're not upholding the law. We're rewriting it to suit the comfortable. The room dead still. You couldn't hear paper move. Not a breath, not a cough. Even the court clerk had stopped typing. Judge Quinn tapped the clock. 1:15. Remaining. You still have time, she said. I've said what needs to be said, Barron replied. This isn't about volume. It's about clarity. And there it was, the moment everyone realized they weren't watching a stunt. They were watching someone who had come not to impress, but to deliver. Thomas Greer sat down. Not by command, just quietly, slowly, like a man who realized the room was no longer his. Hey, if this part got you hooked, you know what to do. Hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, this story's just warming up. As Barron returned to his seat, he didn't look around. No celebration, no smirk, just a single glance toward the woman behind him. She gave a small nod, eyes glassy, hands shaking in her lap. She didn't understand all the legalese, but she understood what just happened. Someone fought for her, and he didn't need to yell to do it. Barron Trump had made his move, not loud, not flashy, but undeniable. The courtroom still hadn't fully exhaled. He'd exposed legal gaps, introduced new evidence, and undercut a corporate legal team with nothing but a binder and a voice that never once rose above measured. And now, the silence left behind wasn't awkward, it was reverent. Like a chapel just after the hymn. But systems don't stay quiet for long. especially not ones built to protect power, not question it. Judge Eleanor Quinn adjusted her glasses. Her fingers tapped the armrest, slowly, rhythmically, like she was measuring something invisible. "Mr. Trump," she said, her voice even, "do you have legal representation on this case?" "No, Your Honor." "Is anyone funding your research?" "No." "So, you're telling me you independently prepared a full rebuttal to one of the most resource-heavy corporate legal machines in the city?" Barron didn't flinch. "Yes, Mom." The pause that followed wasn't silence. It was scrutiny. On the other side of the aisle, Greer wasn't finished, not by a long shot. He stood up slowly, this time without theatrics. The smirk was gone. But the blade? Sharpened. "Your Honor," he began, "I move to question the admissibility of this statement under Rule 403. "On what grounds?" the judge asked, voice clipped. "On the grounds that Mr. Trump has a clear conflict of interest." Barron's eyes narrowed, not in fear, but recognition. He saw it coming. "Objection," he said. "That's a personal attack, not a legal argument." But Greer didn't stop. "Mr. Trump has failed to disclose a relationship between himself and the defendant's family. Specifically, that during a 2-month period in 2016, he resided under their roof." A wave of murmurs rippled through the gallery. It wasn't scandal. It was strategy. Greer couldn't beat the logic, so he'd try to poison the motivation. "The court should know," Greer continued, "that this young man is not here out of principle. He's here because of personal ties, emotional bias, which compromises every legal point he's raised." He delivered it calmly, neatly, like a man who knew the knife had landed. Judge Quinn looked toward Barron. "Is this true?" she asked, voice lower now. Barron stood still, steady. "Yes," he said. "I stayed with them briefly when my mother was recovering from surgery. I was 10. "And you didn't think to mention that?" He nodded. "I didn't think surviving childhood counted as legal bias." There it was again. That edge. Soft-spoken, razor-sharp, but still, the system had found a crack, and the courtroom felt it. The tide trying to turn. Some of the jurors shifted. Even the court reporter paused. Greer's gamble was working, because in law, facts matter. But framing wins. Barron glanced down for the first time. Not in shame, not in retreat, but to steady the part of himself that had just felt the weight of 10 years, pulled back into the spotlight like a weapon. "May I respond to counsel's point?" he asked. Judge Quinn nodded. "Proceed." He stepped forward again, slowly. No binder this time, no pages, just him. "Yes, I lived in their home. I was a child. She gave me soup when no one else could look me in the eye. She folded my sheets and asked nothing in return. That is true." A beat. "But if kindness invalidates truth, then we've already lost the point of justice." The room held its breath. He looked at Greer. Direct, calm. "You don't get to weaponize humanity and call it evidence." Then he turned back to the judge. "If this court wants to disregard my arguments, so be it. But it won't be because they were wrong. It'll be because I cared. This moment hit you? Smash that like button and tell me in the comments, has kindness ever been used against you? And hey, if you're new here, subscribe. These stories cut deeper every time." Judge Quinn sat back. She didn't respond right away. She just stared at him, like she was searching for the lie and not finding it. Across the aisle, Greer didn't blink, but he didn't press further, because somewhere behind his steel gray tie and courtroom bravado, he'd just lost the moral argument, and everyone knew it. But systems don't fall in one round. A second attorney, younger, sharper, female, stood up from the corporate table. Fresh blood. "Your Honor," she said, "regardless of Mr. Trump's poetic defense, he has still failed to demonstrate procedural integrity." She walked toward the exhibit screen like she'd practiced this move 100 times. "This is Exhibit C, the zoning map filed last quarter. Mr. Trump claims the building permit was expired, but this timestamp shows that the city clerk's office retroactively validated the document post-deadline." Barron cut in. She froze, just slightly. "Excuse me?" she said. "It's in the metadata," he replied, already placing a printout on the court's evidence table. "Filed at 11:54 p.m. after miss. That's not standard protocol. And it suggests someone backdated approval." Judge Quinn lifted the paper slowly. Her brows drew together. "If that's," she began. Then the entire acquisition is built on manipulated records, Barron said. And that's not just unethical, it's criminal. Now the storm hit? Audible gasps. Flashbulbs flared. The court deputy stood up instinctively. This wasn't about zoning anymore. This was tampering. This was the kind of thing that gets people disbarred, fired, indicted. The new attorney's mouth opened, but no words came out, because it was all falling apart. Their structure, their timeline, their cover. Barron hadn't just held the line. He'd exposed the system's cracks. Judge Quinn didn't smile, but she nodded. Slow, intentional, like someone realizing they hadn't misjudged him after all. Mr. Trump, she said, please prepare your full statement for submission. I want every page of your documentation on my desk before lunch recess. Yes, Your Honor. As Barron returned to his seat, the courtroom buzzed behind him. Not with doubt, with belief that maybe, just maybe, truth still has a voice, even if it doesn't shout. He'd done it. Barron Trump had exposed procedural fraud, cracked the zoning records wide open, and silenced a corporate legal team with nothing but a binder and the truth. And yet, as the courtroom adjourned for recess and people filtered out to catch their breath, he didn't look relieved. He sat still, binder closed, shoulders stiff, hands folded in front of him. Like he knew something no one else did, like the storm wasn't over, it had just changed direction. The hallway outside the courtroom was chaos. The reporters yelled questions. Cameras tracked his every step. One shouted, Barron, are you planning to go to law school? Another, was this about justice or revenge? He didn't answer. Not a glance, not a word, just moved. Past the noise, past the flashbulbs, toward a hallway most people overlooked, one that led to the back conference room. A woman was waiting there. Dark blazer, simple hair, no press badge, but her presence hit harder than any camera flash. She was the city clerk, the one who signed the backdated permit. You shouldn't have dragged me into this, she said coldly. Barron didn't blink. You dragged yourself the moment you changed that timestamp. She stepped forward, lowered her voice. Do you have any idea what happens if this goes public? What it does to my pension, my family? He looked at her, eyes calm, but sharp enough to slice marble. I know what it did to hers, he said, nodding toward the hallway, toward the woman fighting to keep her home. That shut her up. And then, she said something that stopped him cold. It wasn't my idea. A beat. They came to me, months ago, told me the land had already been promised, told me your name was attached to the file. Barron frowned. What do you mean, my name? The acquisition paperwork, the pitch deck from the development firm. They listed you as a future brand partner. Said you'd back the project if it ever went public. For a split second, everything froze. Not in the room, in his mind. He walked over to the file cabinet in the corner, flipped it open. She didn't stop him. Inside, top drawer, project Eden Heights. He scanned the proposal. 64 pages of development projections, zoning overlays, tax advantages, and on page 7, projected brand endorsements. Barron Trump, Legacy Initiative, his name, in bold, attached to a project built on eviction and fraud. He took a slow breath, then turned the page, and saw something worse. A signature. Not his father's. Here's the twist. This case wasn't just personal, it wasn't just moral, it was planted, set up, engineered, not by accident, but by design. Because while Barron had been fighting to stop the machine, someone else had already assumed he'd be part of it. Back in the hallway, a court officer knocked gently. Mr. Trump, Judge Quinn is asking for you. He nodded, but before leaving he turned to the clerk. How many others were promised this land? She didn't answer. She just looked down. That told him enough. The walk back to court was different this time. Slower, heavier. Because now he wasn't just fighting a corporation. He was fighting his own name. If you felt that gut punch, don't scroll past. Smash that like button. Drop a comment. What would you do if your name was used to hurt someone else? And if you haven't yet, subscribe. We're going deeper. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere had changed again. Less spectacle, more tension. Because the legal part was done, now came the reckoning. Judge Quinn looked at him carefully. Mr. Trump, before we proceed, is there anything you wish to amend in your statement? He looked down at the table, thought, then shook his head. No, Your Honor. You sure? Yes, he said. Because the truth didn't change just the reason it matters. She paused, then nodded. The opposing counsel stood again, trying to salvage what was left. Your Honor, while Mr. Trump's arguments have been unexpectedly articulate, we still believe that power should overwrite truth? Barron cut in, eyes locked. That wasn't my statement, no, just your strategy. Judge Quinn raised a hand. Enough, she said. Mr. Trump, final remarks? He stood. Binder closed, no paper in hand, just him. Legacy isn't about what we build, he said. It's about what we destroy to build it. He looked at the gallery. You all came here expecting a Trump someone, loud, entitled, strategic. You got one. He glanced at the file still sitting beside the evidence tray, just not the one you expected. The gallery was quiet again, not because they were silenced, but because they were listening. He didn't ask for anything, didn't beg, didn't posture, just stood in that courtroom, owning what he wasn't supposed to be, and for the first time, he wasn't trapped by his name. He was choosing what it meant. The verdict came quickly, too quickly for the corporate team to recover. Judge Eleanor Quinn ruled in favor of the residents. The permit was null. The project, frozen. The people who were supposed to be invisible stayed in their homes. But that's not what people remembered. They remembered the kid who didn't raise his voice, who didn't flash a smile for the cameras, who stood in the middle of a legal war and won, not with noise, but with precision. When the gavel dropped, Barron didn't flinch. No fist pump, no grin, he just nodded once, not to the court, to the woman behind him, the one who once made him soup when the world was tearing itself apart outside her front door. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. He understood. As Barron walked out of the courtroom, reporters swarmed. What are you going to do next? Was this about your father? Is this a start to your political career? He said nothing, because sometimes silence is the most honest answer. Back at home, he opened the letter again, the one with his name on it. The proposal, the endorsement, the legacy he never asked for. Then he did something that no press would ever print. He burned it. Not out of anger, but because some names are inherited and others are earned. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you that power doesn't always shout and justice doesn't need permission, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. Leave a comment. What part hit you the hardest? And if you haven't yet, subscribe. Because we tell stories here that make you look twice, not just at the world, but at yourself. This wasn't about fame or winning. It was about standing still when everything around you demands you move. About proving that dignity doesn't need applause. That real strength comes quietly, and in the end. They didn't remember him because he yelled. They remembered him because he didn't have to.